I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes technological revolutions outstrip human capacity to cope with it or to
Yeah.
use it effectively. And with AI, God, there is stuff happening every day.
Welcome to the ReeThink podcast, and today I have a guest that we already had once. And because we couldn't finish our whole discussion, I was inspired to have another time. So, Skip Rizzo, it's nice to have you once again on the pod.
Yeah, our last discussion was fun, but it ended up going over the time, and we didn't get a chance to talk about everybody's favorite topic, AI, and the impact it's going to have on our field. So I'm back.
100%. I mean, it was like the discussion, I really enjoyed it. And we touched on a couple of subjects. In particular, we talked about the flow channel and how games are really good at training the executive function. So I think, as you mentioned already, we want to touch about the favorite topic of everybody.
Yeah. Well, I also have my little buddy here with me. Not an AI kitty, but one of my real organic kitties that always, it seems, whenever I talk to anybody online, she has to come up and join me. She wants to meet people outside of the house, I guess. Anyway, God, that's why we have a whole nother hour, because there's so much to talk about. And we're still in a point where, is this real? Is this going to be transformative? Or is this going to be the start of a walk down a dystopian pathway? I tend to be a tech optimist. And, I look at it through, kind of like looking through a straw sometimes, where I, just kind of see the value of what this could do. But with AI, you have to be very careful that you're not just seduced by that narrow view, and look at all the potential for unintended consequences. So I'm trying to keep as much of an open mind, but it's hard for me because I see the benefits all the time of this. And I think when you look at the risk profile at this point, there's a lot of high visibility risk that gets talked about. But when you compare that risk with the risks that we've been willing to accept in other areas, I'm less convinced that we're on the road to hell and more excited about the future. I mean, yeah, medications, they can make a difference for people, but they also come with side effect profiles. Well, we accept a certain amount of risk, and maybe we've been brainwashed into accepting a higher level of risk than we should be with some pharmaceuticals. I mean, really, when you see a commercial on television for a new medication, they fast forward through all the risk, and, a drug meant for depression also puts people at risk for suicide. And, it's like, all right, what's going on here? But with AI, I think, we're getting a lot of discussion of those risks now, and people are paying attention. We, in our AI work, we beat the heck out of it to try to make it screw up, to make it give bad information, to make it hallucinate, to make it talk about topics that we didn't want it to talk about. And we're getting better and better at managing that. Now, can you translate from things that are specifically designed for healthcare and generalize that to ChatGPT for everyone, or Claude, or Gemini? And that's the big issue. You're talking about two different things: the more global issues where it's being driven by the market, versus AI for healthcare where it's driven by, at this point, is it safe and efficacious?
Yeah, I see that. And for me, it's like this is an evolving topic all the time. Like, I still like see the upsides I see a lot of potential and upsides. I see also, at least I think, I see also the hype very clearly. And I want to pick your brain on this as well, because one thing that we understood as AI are there are different like models of AI. So one is machine learning. I'm very like, let's say, I'm very optimistic about machine learning. Then we have like the LLMs, which are like, let's say, the spearhead of AI at this point of time. I think all the hype, all the things came from LLMs. And then we have like different variations or potentially the next breakthroughs which might come up in the future. So I want to ask you, where do you see like the most potential, like let's say for like integrating, for instance, in a VR therapeutics experience, something around those lines, where you see like, for instance, maybe Gen AI can help or not, or what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think the starting point is looking at it as a productivity tool, but the ultimate principle here is to use it for decision support, not so much for decision making. That the human has the ultimate say in evaluating all the content or the evidence, if you will, and deciding what is ethical, what is safe to use. These are things, I mean, we're the representatives of the human race. We're humans.
Mm-hmm.
This is just a new tool, and I think it can be a powerful productivity tool at a baseline level, but not without good human judgment. So, whenever I use AI in my writing, but I always try to write, to submit to an AI stuff I've already written and ask for ways to extend it or to edit it or to clean up my sloppy grammar or something, or to make it more less biased, because I tend to be biased in some of my stuff, and to make it clearer, to point things out. But I never just take what it gives me and throw it into a publication. I go back and forth with it, and I clean it up and edit it and make sure that it's not hallucinating or giving me some half-assed, information. I mean, that's just what humans have to be able to do with it. The fear of this turning into a sentient being and having its own motivations, unless somebody programs in a specific intent and a motivation, I just don't see that naturally occurring. I think we're anthropomorphizing AI into thinking because it can mimic our information processing abilities in some ways, that automatically is going to endow it with sentience. I'm still
That's,
I don't believe that's possible.
I see it the same. I mean, we have this like Turing test, and Turing test was initially that when AI is at this point where it can mimic somebody and is not distinguished by a person, whether this other like interface is a person or not, then it passes the Turing test. And some one can argue that we passed that already, right? But I agree. I also don't see that AI becomes sentient, because in the case of LLMs, these are just like predictors of words in that sense. So it just has like a large data set where it compares whenever, like, let's say the word blue comes in, it's very likely that the next possible sentence is with the mention of a color or a car or whatever it is. And that's why I believe that that's not a sentient being. And what is also interesting in, like, for instance, in humans, so I can give another example, and I'm super curious about what you think about that. And this is just my way of thoughts, is, for instance, when I'm trying to, let's say, formulate a sentence, then I access different parts of my brain. One is that maybe the like the center where I formulate words, but then is another part that is maybe accessed because of a, let's say, hierarchy or logic that is used in order to combine it. And as far as I understand it, with like these large language models, they don't have like an inherent logic per se. They just go with these like neural sets of what is the prediction of the next best word or sentence. So yeah, that's why I don't think we can talk about sentient beings at some point of time. And there is also another discussion, which is a more spiritual one, but that's also like without like that's not a technical explanation. But I'm curious about what you think about that.
Well, I draw back on an analogy I make with VR, and that
Mm-hmm.
is, the movie Ready Player One. A lot of people say that that is sort of an indictment about VR,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't believe it is. I think what it is an indictment is people's humanity and caring for planet and the environment and the reality of human to human interaction. Because why did people in that movie or in that book revert to VR for their most of their waking hours? Because they made the world such a shitty place. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a dystopian future that's portrayed, and so people retreat to VR because you know, the real world kind of sucks. Well, I think with AI, particularly when it comes to virtual human interaction, which is the area I focus on quite a bit, people say, oh, well, what about that elderly person? They're going to rely on AI as a companion and then, as, some kind of support agent. And there's something unethical or unspiritual about having a relationship with an artificial or digital entity like that that isn't real. And so, well, if you believe that, then maybe donate 10 hours of your week going to nursing homes and providing real world
Mm-hmm.
companionship to people that don't have anybody. That might be the AI may put a sharp focus on the things we lack in terms of our social interaction with per human to human. So AI is going to fill that vacuum with something, whether it's companionship to fight loneliness in older people, or it's helping a veteran that's transitioning from active duty to civilian status, where high level of stress, suicide rate doubles during that first year from the previous year, or
Mm-hmm.
suicide risk. Maybe we need to look at the AI value as a cautionary tale of what we're missing as humans.
Mm-hmm.
But until we do that, AI provides opportunities to address things where there just isn't that human, there isn't that human connection available. So maybe it's an indictment of what modern society has delivered to us and how it's affected our caring for each other
Yeah.
or the economics of it. A lot of times, the case that we make is that we're not replacing humans. We're not making virtual therapists. We're filling in the gaps where somebody could benefit from getting access to information or having a non-stigmatizing discussion with an AI that will never be available from a real person because the economics don't drive it, and it's something I fear in the United States right now, whereas, current administration, if you'll call it that, has a real positive view towards AI. So I should be all excited about it. But
Mm-hmm.
what they're doing, particularly at the VA, they're cutting the human resources and thinking that AI is going to substitute. Like
Mm-hmm.
recently, there was large number of cuts at the VA, and some of those cuts involve people that manned suicide hotlines,
Wow.
helplines. They're
Yeah.
cutting those people. Are they anticipating that the people that the people that remain are going to do work twice as hard, or are they anticipating, which I believe they are, that
Mm-hmm.
AI is going to replace them? And
Yeah.
even though we develop applications, mobile apps with a conversational AI character
Mm-hmm.
designed to talk to somebody in a crisis moment, and to help them develop a safety plan. The motive on that is just to keep someone talking and push them or suggest or persuade them to talk to a real person.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge I have. Is AI going to give large corporations excuses to cut areas where humanity is needed? And does that get us on a slippery slope towards relying on it because it's the best game in town based on the resources a person may have? I always make the case that the World Health Organization estimates that about 1 billion people on the planet have a mental health condition, of which now it looks like from their estimates, 80% will never see the inside of a therapy office.
Yeah.
So do we got to break down barriers to care? Well, how do we do it? Do we use AI, or do we put more resources into mental health and recognize it as like we recognize heart disease or diabetes or whatever, as something that requires human effort and requires more resources? I can make a strong case for that, that if you address mental health conditions, you're going to lower the costs of medical care because of so much of medical conditions are stress related.
Yeah.
Or due to unawareness of treatment, so that people don't get a treatment until it's too late, and then it becomes extremely costly, whereas preventative stuff isn't implemented early on that could reduce the cost. So I think I can make a case, and others have, that having better mental health services is going to actually reduce the costs on the back end. But that's a hard sell because it's a longer term, longitudinal pitch. And most, corporations or healthcare agencies, at least in the United States, we have hardcore, late stage capitalism governing our medical system.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a harder case to make to the people that are looking at quarterly earning reports. So
it's so fascinating when we talk about all these things, because at the end of the day, when I draw this in and I think around every different possibility, I always come to the conclusion that no matter where we go, no matter what technology we implement, one thing that is very clear to me is like we have like a fundamental broken system, in that sense that we have not growing up in a way that we learn to use our tools correctly. So for instance, like with AI, we had the same also with quantum physics and all these different inventions and insights we gained, is like we have this potential with AI to do a lot of really good things, as you mentioned. But I always come back to the incentives, because you can make this case of, like you explained it, that we say, okay, we use AI in order to facilitate these problems where we have somebody that certainly needs help, but we use in a conversational way that he seeks help of a human. But then you have the other case, which is kind of similar, that we use like in these VA situations, that we use conversational AI to support them and cut back on the humans. So it's almost the same, almost, but the intention and the incentives are two different things. And at some point I was also like really thinking about, like, we have this AI can be something very, very positive and very, very negative. And now I'm leaning towards that it's only positive because of it exposes everything. And these problems, we had these problems even before, but now with like this AI as a pressure cooker, it's so clear that we have to get rid of that. And for me, it's like aligning our incentives more to the human outcome.
Yeah, I mean, this is the challenge, and it goes back to, is the adoption of AI a symptom of a malaise in humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there is that element, but at the same time, it does provide a tremendous capability to improve productivity. But maybe we should be thinking about improving productivity in terms of enhancing education,
Yes.
where there's never enough teachers, and that you can use AI as a supplement to the time that humans and teachers can spend with students. Can you enhance that time and make it engaging with a non-fatiguing, always available, comprehensive knowledge base that speaks to you in a friendly tone, or can tell by your voice if you're confused, even if you're
Mm-hmm.
saying, no, I get it, I kind of get it, and it picks that up and says, well, I'll show you an alternative way to learn this.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that there's never going to be enough human resources for that.
I agree. I have
But
even
yeah, go ahead.
a similar example of from the education area. So this is a guy I spoke to. Manu Kapoor is his name, and he created this learning framework called productive failure, and it's 3 times as effective that a normal learning frameworks. But the thing is with productive failure, it's like to give you an example, what it is in a gist is basically you expose people early to the not to the method how you solve a problem, but rather you present the challenge and let them struggle and fail a couple of times before you suggest bit by bit potentials how they can like try to solve that problem. And the thing is, and that's the interesting thing, it's probably our natural way to learn, and that's why it creates superior results. However, the preparation that goes into like having a curriculum like that is extreme, and that's why it was not a scalable solution. However, with generative AI, this is now a scalable solution. And I think these are the applications where I believe like this will make a huge difference. And if we pursue AI like this, it will be a huge benefit in so many ways. However, if we like view it from this different angle where we try to replace humans and not like enhance our experience or enhance our learning or whatever, rather replacing like from an economical viewpoint only, I think then we end up with really, 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 really bad outcomes. And you can see it right now. Everybody, like a lot of people are talking about AI slap and all these things. So I think that is probably where the biggest misconception comes from.
Yeah. And, to the credit of humans, I'm seeing more and more ethical guidelines, more discussion, not like throw this stuff out, but here are the guardrails. I mean, guardrails have been talked about since the early days of ChatGPT, when it was really, nobody said guardrails about AI, before 2020, because it wasn't good enough to need guardrails. um, well, it wasn't widespread, you know, accessible, where, any Joe Bag of Donuts, can open up an AI program and, ask it questions about, mental health or suicide or whatever, and get a credible, whether it's accurate or not, but a credible response. So, with what's happened, recently, it's very compelling, it's very exciting, but now we have a need for these standards. We have a need for design principles.
Mm.
We have a need for fail-safe, strategies to detect when it's going off the rails and to correct it or to pause it, or at least give the customer or the user, fair warning, which, we're doing. But so, I see the National Academies of Science have put out a really good set of guidelines. I mean, I just see agencies all over the place that are putting out these guidelines, and we're doing it as well. We published a paper last year on guidelines for patient-facing AI, and all the usual suspects are in there that any ethical healthcare professional would focus on: the need for privacy, confidentiality, accuracy, monitoring of the AI over time, because it may change based on new information that comes in. And some of those changes may be positive, but some of those changes may be inaccurate depending on what the interaction is. So these kinds of guidelines are essential. And I think it's a positive symptom of smart people recognizing there is something here that can be of value for humans, but not if you just let it run wild, that you really need to monitor it, to be transparent, and to do the proper science to document where it's valuable and where it might not be. It's funny, there was a randomized controlled trial using AI that tested out the idea of using it for people that were depressed and anxious. And in the same month that application, I think it used Therabot. In the same month, there was a company, and I'm going to look it up real quick because I have it readily available. There's a company that shut down that was an AI healthcare company. Let's see, I have it. I think I have it. And it was because the folks that built it said not only was it insufficient, but it was dangerous. Here we go.
Wow.
So Therabot was the one that did this RCT of generative AI chatbots for mental health treatment. This came out in 2025 in March. It was in the New England Journal of Medicine AI, the March issue. So if you want to check that out. But then a similar time frame, well, actually, this was later on in November, so it wasn't at the same time, but Yara AI, YARA space AI, shut down. And one of the quotes from Joe Braidwood, who was one of the co-founders, was the moment someone truly vulnerable reaches out, someone in crisis, someone in deep trauma, someone contemplating ending their life, AI becomes dangerous, not just inadequate, dangerous, Braidwood said. Now, I'm not sure if I buy that, but it's good that people are thinking like this because it provides a counterbalance to people that are, believe fully in the hype and don't do the deep critical analysis of the risk. So that's the thing I'm seeing more and more of, that there's a cottage industry of people really trying to formalize, how to build this stuff in a way that's safe and ethical.
I mean, I can imagine if you are like in a very, very vulnerable state and you are about to think ending your life, and I can imagine that the last thing that I want to discuss with somebody is not something that is not that is artificial. I can understand that because to come to this space, you probably went through so much, like let's say, so much trauma that is maybe also related to other humans and also maybe to neglect of personal connections, that if you are then in this state where you're not even able to talk to somebody that is real, I think in that position it can push you to the edge. I can understand that. And once again, I think where we lost the plot with all these technologies, with all these insights, is almost like that we don't put humans in center of our existence. And I believe not in a narcissistic way, but rather in a more empathetic way. And I understand why, and I know these are narratives like discussed in the public. I don't know what is real, but I know that the whole position of Elon Musk to fund OpenAI when it was like a non-profit was that he believes that other people who pushing AI, Sergey Brin and all these guys at Google, they are not like humanists, like humanitarians. And I understand that. Whether this is true or not, we can debate that. Actually, I don't have any clue when I don't speak with these people, whether what is the truth, because you never get their agendas, so to say. But just like in that, I get that perspective, and I feel like we are always in danger when we are not like really human aligned, and this comes with like that we have also a positive self view of what are humans capable without negating our own shadow in that sense. And that's why it makes me very positive when we find like finally, yeah, it's important to have these human connections, and it's also important to have these technologies, but let be humans at the center of it. And I think if we can steer it in that direction, I don't see any problem at all. But it's still like I feel like we are oscillating between getting it and not getting it. And I feel like also probably one problem is also the systems that are in place right now are not incentivized for like a new way of being in that sense.
Right. I think, when you're governed by a profit motive, you do your risk benefit analysis. And just like the auto industry did many years ago, where they estimated that if they put a car out that was unsafe,
Mm-hmm.
Was it a cool car? Was it neat? Would they sell a lot of them? And what would the cost be? The liability. And it was easier, it was cheaper. They would make more money paying for lawsuits when a car
Mm-hmm.
failed
Yeah.
than what they would lose if they had to retool and fix the problem in the first place. So they looked at a cost benefit, not from a humanitarian perspective, but from
Mm-hmm.
a profit motive, bottom line perspective. And so they would let things go. I mean, Ralph Nader wrote the book on Safe at Any Speed back in the 60s, about the Corvair, the Chevrolet Corvair, and that was the
Yeah.
governing factor on that. And I think it's the same thing with some of these AI companies. How much can they afford to pay off and settle a bunch of lawsuits when something goes bad versus how much they stand to make? And it's very interesting. There's a podcast I about halfway through called The Last Invention. I don't know if you've
Mm.
heard of that one, but in episode 11, they talk about the AI skeptics. And
Mm-hmm.
they say that there's three AI skeptics. There's
Mm-hmm.
ones that believe that it's all hype and it's about making money.
Mm-hmm.
The second ones are people that don't believe that they believe that the hype overshadows what the capabilities are, that the capabilities aren't there, which I don't buy at all.
Yeah.
And the third is, well, okay, let's kind of maybe like people like me. I wouldn't call myself an AI skeptic, but I'm an AI cautionary person where, okay, there's limitations, there's,
Mm-hmm.
risks, but they could be manageable if we put the hard work into that and we
Mm-hmm.
find the through line where this can help people. And so the money one, the guy they interviewed on that, boy, he was just saying like, Hinton, when he walked away from AI or said it was dangerous, he'd been studying as an academic all these years.
Mm-hmm.
He actually made the point that, well, he's doing that because when you say something's dangerous, people become more intrigued by it. They think it has more power, and it doesn't have that power. It's all smoke and mirrors. Anyway, it's very interesting to hear these different perspectives for why people may be averse to using AI. I think it does come down to a reflection of our capability in that era, in this era, and what we're not willing to put resources into, like adequate mental health care and access and VA call line
Mm-hmm.
providers.
You know what is also interesting, that the whole discussion that we have right now is also mirroring what we have seen just recently with the trials with social media, where also Mark Zuckerberg was talked about, and I feel like this is the same problem there. They knew that it has an impact on, in particular, children, on the psyche and also on mental health. They did it regardless. Of course, they admit that they didn't know it back then, but at some point
Yeah,
it was
they exploited it. There's evidence that they
exactly.
exploited that.
So I'm curious about your opinion. On the one hand, like for me, it was obvious, but I'm curious what is your opinion on that?
Well, again, this is a bottom line driven company,
Mm-hmm.
and that is the big challenge, and I think that's how it's going to be with with commodity usage of AI. There's going to
Mm-hmm.
be that motive to keep eyeballs on the screen and so on, for better or worse, with no regard to the unintended or unintended consequences or consequences they know may exist, but they do the risk benefit.
Yeah.
By the same token, when you look at it from this global societal perspective, I see those challenges. When I look at what is human capacity and how AI can improve human capacity, I get more of an optimistic view of it.
Indeed. Yeah.
And particularly as I'm getting older, I'm 71. My brain doesn't work as well. In some areas, maybe it works pretty well, the wisdom stuff and all that. But when it comes to, pure hard cognitive multitasking, executive function, there are lapses that occur with aging. And I
Mm-hmm.
look at the AI, the support I get from AI, from a very tight use of it, can fill in those gaps for me so that I can still maintain my productivity. And I think about myself, but then I think about people with disabilities,
Mm-hmm.
people that are lonely, people with healthcare conditions. If we can build this stuff following these ethical guidelines, they can be a force multiplier for people that have these challenges that they have to face, and can improve the quality of their life. So, I go back and forth between, what are the people that are driven mainly by their motivation is by money. And there's nothing wrong. You have to make money to build something and
Absolutely.
to evolve it and maintain it and so on. But without the deep ethical regard and the stripping of regulations we see in the United States now, you know, I think Trump signed an executive order saying that the states couldn't do their individual legislation to limit AI and mental health. Like, I think it was Illinois, and in my state, California. In California, you can't call an AI a therapist.
Yeah.
That was one of the early ones, and any mental health application in Illinois was banned. And there's all these different state regulations that have popped up that Trump signed an executive order saying none of that can be done. It's all
Yeah.
a federal issue, and so, when I think of his character, then I think, well, is his motivation really caring about people and the impact of a technology, or is it about generating revenue um, and trying to, I don't know. So, it's a political, societal issue on a larger scale, but in healthcare, we have to rise to a higher power because we have sets
Absolutely.
of ethical guidelines, you know. And in my field in psychology, they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty rigorous, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of the patient, being protected at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
So
I feel like also it's striking a balance. I mean, as you said, like making money or winning in the game of business, it's not inherently wrong. It's just it goes wrong when there's no regard for other things. And And on the other hand, what is also very complicated is I know like from the United States that one of your like core values, when you can speak about core values, is that self-responsibility. And I got that when you, like for instance, you create a product and at some point you say, and this is also the libertarian in me that says like, you have to, you cannot blame all the responsibility on those people that creating the product. But there's one hard line that I draw is like for children, because children are not like, they are not fully developed. They don't have like this discernment that we have as an adult. And I feel like you cannot blame the responsibility on children
Right.
to make the right decisions. And that's why I feel like in regards to protecting children, I'm really for regulation. But also on the other hand, I think like we have to strike a balance also protecting like, for instance, like society as a whole, because too much regulation is also something that is hindering our growth, our means of innovation. But on the same token, I also clearly see like there are certain, like, let's say things like healthcare, where I believe like it's probably not properly aligned when we talk about like making a business out of something that is in the center is the human and health. So it's really like I feel like there are certain things that are not properly incentivized, and probably one of the great things, and then we come full circle about AI as a technology. I think now with all these technologies, it's so obvious that a lot of things are just broken and for a long time now, and we just need to move on, because as you said, like with all these politicians, you're never sure about their agendas. We know that for a fact that big or like very very rich people are able to buy presidents, and we all understand how the political game is played in the United States with like the fundraising they need to do. So you like thinking straight, it's normal that every party is captured by other agendas when they are in a, let's say, in the incentive of raising money. And then of course the people are not giving up their money just for like goodwill. And the funny thing is, even for myself, for instance, if I had the possibility to influence, for instance, the regulation. So I can give you an example. So we are talking in Switzerland, we are talking about a law to govern social media. But you know what, so it's just in the draft state. And you know what? It was so funny when I read the draft state, they are just talking about like narrative control. So like all these different things they can regulate, but they are not talking about regulation about who gets access, for instance, children. And I was like, that's nuts. You cannot discuss this topic without this discussion of who gets access and when. And then I was like, of course I need to do something. So I'm already in this position where I want to influence that outcome, right? So it's not inherently bad that we want to have influence, but I think the way it's structured at this point of time, and it's just not benefiting like vast amount of people. And then once again we ask ourselves is who decides that? Who decides this? Who is not compromised and is able to decide that? But we have to be honest to ourselves and say like everybody's compromised in certain ways. So what we are going to do now is like it's really hard, but now again these technologies, just like AI, they expose it to a vast amount that there's like fundamentally things are totally not working at this point of time, and we have to change it. Yeah,
It's almost like AI is a barometer of the health of humanity.
yes,
And it's so that, you know, if you have a technology that can improve efficiency, like AI can in some areas, is the purity of your motives sound? Is it that you're going to use that to reduce costs and generate revenue? Or are you going to use that to do what you're doing better and to expand the positive elements of healthcare? So, you can use AI and eliminate maybe some people on a call line for a crisis, whatever crisis calling at the VA. That would be an example of using AI to reduce human input rather than to use AI as a way to improve care and to get the person to the right resource that's human based. And I think that's the fundamental difference. Is your motive about, the workforce be damned? I want to use this new level of efficiency to reduce costs and generate revenue, or do I want to use this new level of efficiency to improve what we can do and keep all those same people, on the job, but have a tool that makes them better at their job, that gives them quicker access to differential diagnoses or to the research literature, or, that informs a clinical direction, or that helps to monitor a patient's interaction within a training or a treatment regimen, that a human then looks at and then plots the next step. I mean, that's the dynamic tension. And so AI really, I think, is that barometer or thermometer or whatever measurement that is reflective of what we're facing.
I totally agree with you. I know you have to jump, so that's why I want to ask you, what is one more thing that you want to share with the audience? Reflection, important insight, or whatever you want, because I know you have to jump.
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes. So, I mean, I do want to brag a little bit about some of the status of some of the AI things that I'm working on in terms of that improved efficiency and, I believe, quality, but keeping in mind that everything we're doing has an underlying motive of connecting a person with a live provider,
Yeah.
not to replace that live provider. It sounds intuitive, but it is a very subtle set of elements there. We, with a company, I don't know if I should name the name of it, but we've been developing veteran-focused applications. And because the VA here is, still very ethically concerned about whether you put an AI in front of patients for patient care, they were willing to partner with developing an application that was less mentally health focused and more on functional support. So looking at veterans, military people that had just left the military, and helping them learn about the VA and what resources they have, and helping them to move towards those resources. Now we got a green light on that and did about 1,000-person study over 3 weeks. They had access to a conversational AI to find out about what VA services were available and how to access them and get a little support in that process. As I think I mentioned previously, in the first year after retirement, the suicide risk doubles from the military, because it's a big transition. You have a whole different life, and it's very stressful. Well, we found in that study with a prototype that we got like over 90%, what they call net promoter score. Would you use this yourself when it becomes a product, or would you recommend it to a friend? And, most people said, yeah, the qualitative testimonials were off the charts. With people that have been out for, a long period of time, we got comments like people saying, I learned more in 10 minutes interacting with this conversational AI than I learned in the last 10 years of trying to find these resources. And a lot of comments like that. And so we do have a tool that can add value, but, it was a well thought out and very constrained application with a specific focus. It didn't go off the rails. And we regularly red team these applications where we try every possible way to make it hallucinate, or to give bad information, or to talk about things that it's not programmed to talk about properly or ethically. And so we beat on these things. So I'm pretty excited about that. I'm also excited about working with another group that is generating a, a, a sensing system that can detect changes in your speech and your vocal acoustic properties of speech, to maybe detect when someone is in a higher or lower state of distress,
Mm-hmm.
as well as facial expression and so on. And, this has a slippery slope to it as well, where we can go into the 1984 kind of a thing. Um, but when people opt into this, there's the potential that, that a virtual human can get a
Mm-hmm.
better reading of the user and deliver more customizable, unique information. And I see that as being very positive. And work that we did back in 2013, 2014, a project called SimSensei, or otherwise known as Detection and Computational Analysis of Psychological Signals. This was funded by DARPA. What took us 2 years to build then got built in about 2 months.
Wow.
It's dramatic. And now we've got this powerful sensing system that can run in parallel with an AI to, if somebody opts in, to be able to sense the user state when they're interacting with a virtual
Mm-hmm.
human and use that information in a positive way. Um, that's very compelling, but it comes with so much ethical responsibility and
Yeah.
privacy and transparency and opting in and all of those standard things.
That's
But I
so.
worry about that technology
Yeah.
escaping. I mean, people can build this themselves,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
are they
Yeah.
going to use it without allowing somebody to know? I mean, every
Yeah.
time I interact on Zoom, is there a background organization that's, you know,
Hmm.
building a large language model of emotionality that
Yeah.
will be used for negative purposes or to quantify me personally, so that if I go to an airport, is is that going to be a data set that Elon Musk has control over to determine whether I'm lying or not, whether claiming all the things that I brought in from Europe that I bought, or whatever.
But this is like a legit exciting stuff, in particular the one with the sensing, because I was immediately drawn or thinking about, for instance, that would be perfect for pilots, for instance, or even let's say in cars in particular, let's say very narrow applications, but in particular pilots, I think that would be amazing. But I totally see that, and sometimes it's almost like we are not mature for this kind of technology at this point of time, because I totally understand it, because on the one hand it's exciting to do all this stuff, but on the other hand it's like when we are not mature as a collective, maybe it's better that it's not coming out right now. But amazing stuff that you are working on. And also I know also from Stephen Kotler that he's also working for a companion that is working with veterans. So I salute your work for that, because although we are not so familiar in Europe with this problem with veterans, I know that in the US this is a big topic, and that these people that are serving their countries, and it comes from their best intentions, and when they are back home they are broken humans in that sense,
Yeah.
and somebody needs to help them. I'm super yeah, proud, and also like I love that you are doing that, and it sounds like you are having great progress with the project that you're doing.
Well, thank you for that. I'm hoping, this is my other cat doing a flyby. I'm hoping that, in our course of actually hands-on building this stuff and testing it, that we can contribute to understanding the good, the bad, and the ugly with this.
Mm,
And that will inform, hopefully, the work of others. And that we've got to be vigilant,
yes.
when we see. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Sometimes technological revolutions outstrip human capacity to, to cope with it or to use it effectively. And with AI, God, there is stuff happening every day, and I'm not sure if we're capable at this point. There's a great book I read when I was in college called Future Shock, Alvin Toffler, and it was predicting things. And this was before before the internet. He was predicting that society, the technology and everything was moving along so fast it outpaced the human capacity to cope. I think now we have that on steroids, so we got to be careful.
Hey, Skip, I'll let you jump. Thank you so much for taking the time and being on this pod the second time. Thank you so much.
And, let's check in again in a few months or a year or whatever and see where it all stands, see if our predictions are accurate or if they're, if they were, overwrought and worrisome. And I think we're going to be on, though. In a year, we'll talk about this and say we were right about that.
We will definitely do that. All right. See ya.
All right, Rudy.